What's a drink that you have made very quickly at 12 a.m. when you have that paper due the next day? What is a drink you've taken into a business meeting because you know it's going to go a little too long, or it's just a place where you go to get a drink and you need to chill with some friends? That's definitely going to be coffee, right? We've all had to drink some coffee at some point in our lives, and that's why I chose to do my campaign for advertisement on coffee. I chose to make a coffee roasting company called Brooding, which I will explain the reason behind that name in a little bit. But first, I want to give a little introduction into those first 5 advertisement mentalities that any advertiser needs to take into account when they are creating an ad. So those would cover audience analysis, branding, mythical elements, advertising appeals, and product placement. So for that audience analysis, you want to take into account demographics and psychographics. The audience that I chose to direct this advertisement towards was the millennials, Generation Y. That demographic is going to fall in between 18 and 27-year-olds because it's a generation. It's going to cover all races, all genders. The interesting thing about Generation Y is actually they are the most educated generation. We have the most ability to be educated, and we take that opportunity because we're very driven as a generation. That results in a higher pay rate because of our education, and that results in a bigger lifestyle, you could say. So that is kind of the demographics. The psychographics, which I found very interesting as I researched, come a lot from just the echo of the previous generations into our years of being born, because when we were born, a lot of change was happening, a lot of terrorism, a lot of like 9/11, things like that were occurring, and that really reinforced patriotism in us in the sense of just wanting a lot of equality, a lot of justice, a lot of individuality, and taking what had happened previously in generations and deciding this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and we're going to be really driven for what is right. And that really comes into play into each person's life as they choose to be very individual in what they represent and really wanting to reinforce that they are an individual in those mindsets. You also want to take into account universal commonplaces, which is just the common value that is held overall by this audience, which kind of reinstates a demographic that I believe it's a lot about change and individuality. And that's seen again in their education, in the business, and socializing. You also want to determine which audience-specific norm is existing in this audience. I would definitely say that successful advertisements are known for taking the normalities of an audience every day and then reinstating and reinforcing it in like an ad, in a commercial, whatever it is, radio commercial, whatever it is, that kind of is like the voice echoing the voice inside to that audience. So you really reinforce that through the props, through your characters, through the story of your advertisement. That kind of brings us into branding, which is going to be the next step of any advertisement. You want to brand specifically to draw in your audience. Forbes has recorded that the millennial has a whopping 12-second attention span. So you want to be really quick when trying to get their attention. I chose to kind of play on humor as a way to get their attention. I choose the word brooding because I wanted to play on humor and like puns in the sense that play on 2 words. So brooding can be either brooding like I'm brooding as a person, or it can be I'm brewing coffee. And so using those 2, I wanted to kind of reinstate that value of that artistic mindset where they kind of are brooding, but also they drink a lot of coffee, so you're brewing your coffee. I figured that would also be really good for social media, for hashtags and such. You want to be convincing. You want to be very convincing in your branding, whatever that looks like. Brooding is going to be a craftsman, connoisseur roasting company, so the product itself speaks to millennials to be both unique and particular. Anything that's like connoisseur is going to seem very high class, which is going to appeal to a very highly educated and also a very highly driven socially and successfully generation. They are said to, they work in order to live the lifestyle they want. So that is also something I took into consideration when I was branding. The next thing you really want to talk and think about as you work through what that advertisement is going to look like is the mythical element. So that's kind of the story behind your ad. My specific ad, which I will now show you, this is it. The heading says brooding, coffee roasters, mornings never looked so good. I chose all of this very specifically. It shows a young woman that feels empowered, social, and driven. The woman showed in this advertisement represents the millennial generation and reinforces the values of success, of laughter, having fun, of being busy. She's on her phone for a reason, and that is all very chosen specifically for that ad. The next thing you kind of want to start looking at is going to be advertising appeal, which does kind of play into the mythical element. Advertisement appeal is the process of playing on the consumer's social and psychological needs. Every person has specific fears and needs that if you start challenging them, then they're going to get, that's going to get that 12-second attention span. So you want to play to different emotions. With brooding, I chose to play on the emotional aspect. I chose to use fear and humor as the emotions in order to rein in my target. Millennials are known for craving society and having fun, and I wanted to represent in that advertisement that when you're at brooding, whether you're drinking brooding, whether you're just talking to your friends at the actual coffee place, you are having fun. And so that's why she's laughing. That's why I'm making sure she's filling the whole space, looking directly at who is across from her. In this case was the photographer, but in advertisement I want to represent the person looking at that ad. She's engaging, she's having fun, she is ready to go to her next business meeting. Those were the things that I really wanted to reinstate. And also the way I played into fear was just, if you aren't doing these things, if you aren't having coffee, if you aren't at brooding, then are you missing out? And they're also known as a generation who fears missing out. So you kind of want to tug on that fear a little bit in this advertisement. The next thing you take into account is the product placement. This is to reinforce the final whammy of their values, of their desires. Millennials fall in love with caffeine at an early age. Soda is seen as unhealthy, and coffee offers that same jolt without the socially unacceptable soda addiction. It's also seen as a little bit more classy, and so it kind of holds everything that millennials find dear. They love status, they love experience, and they love personalization. And you can personalize a coffee. A coffee is going to represent you, and that's how coffee is now seen. It's not just a black drink of coffee. It's going to be, it represents your personality, it represents your style, it represents your drivenness, any of those things. So that's something you want to kind of reinforce. And the way I did that was the wooden walls. I wanted that to show kind of that more hipster thought process. The rectangle plate of toast is, it's wooden, also more unique. And I wanted really golden hues of lighting. I want to have an aesthetic that was very bright and cheerful, drawing you in, making you feel awake. So I also wanted to kind of reinforce there's 2 different coffee drinks in that picture, just that there is a diversity of coffee drinks that you can choose from to represent the different types of people that are in the millennial generation. I hope that inspires you to grab a cup of coffee, and I hope that also explains how advertisement works.